Hello and welcome to Botcrim. I'm Tim Jaggs, I'm Botcrim's founder. If you work in a youth-serving organisation, you're very familiar with the idea of criminal background checks being required before anybody can start working with minors and vulnerable adults. You're aware of the training you have to go through and understanding what sexual abuse is, how to react to it or respond to it if you see it. If you're a mandatory reporter, you know who to notify, and you understand the importance of following policies and procedures around one-to-one interactions. You may have other rules and specific obligations that you follow in your organisation. They'll be different for if you're a church or a school or a sports club, for example. But broadly speaking, that framework, known as the safe environment, is the framework that almost all youth-serving organisations across the country follow. And when I say almost all, I mean broadly 99%. What you probably get confused about is why is it you keep seeing news reports of people continuing to be arrested for committing sexual abuse? You must be wondering, like a lot of other people, why on earth is it that if everybody's following these rules that are supposed to prevent sexual abuse, and we know we are, how is it that sexual abuse keeps happening? It may come as a surprise to you that in fact sexual abuse is rising. In the last 10 years, adult-on-child sexual abuse has doubled. Child-on-child sexual abuse, meanwhile, has increased 5 times. Breaking the cycle is about understanding why it is that that we're failing to prevent sexual abuse well enough, and in fact why it is we're still using the same processes even though sexual abuse has doubled in the last 10 years. The reason this really matters for you isn't just because everybody wants to protect children as well as possible. That we will take as given. Why it's important to you is that because sexual abuse keeps rising, the costs of failing to prevent sexual abuse for the people and organisations that are held responsible for doing that, even when they're following all of the safe environment requirements, have become very, very significant. All of the costs have risen sharply. In addition to sexual abuse itself doubling, the consequences in terms of disruption have increased dramatically. The disruption to an organisation and to the people working for it can now last from between 1 and 7 years, not the 1 year that it used to be 10 years ago. The reputation damage is now very, very significant. 10 years ago, every sexual abuse incident would have been, broadly speaking, covered by an NDA. Well, that's certainly not the case anymore. In financial terms, a large sexual abuse settlement 10 years ago would have been $250,000. Today, it's $25 million. The risk landscape has completely transformed, and yet youth-serving organisations are still required to follow basically exactly the same processes that were originally designed over 20 years ago to protect minors and vulnerable adults based on what was known 20 years ago, and those processes have not changed. And that's led to youth-serving organisations like yours being caught in a trap or trapped in a cycle of increasing sexual abuse and ever rising, and in fact faster rising, costs of failing to prevent sexual abuse. And the only response we've currently got is to carry on using the safe environment, essentially playing some whack-a-mole, because every time there's a new one-to-one interaction that leads to abuse, that's a new policy and procedure that's added. But what doesn't happen is that the fundamental underpinnings of a systematic approach to protecting children still isn't part of a safe environment. So what Breaking the Cycle is all about is three relatively short videos, and each video has a 2-minute introduction where you'll get everything you need to learn. If you don't want to get all the details, it'll just give you, here's what this is all about. The rest of the video will give you the further information. The first video will explain how that cycle came into being. The second video will talk about what the cycle actually looks like. And the third video will explain how do we break this cycle? What is the story that youth-serving organisations need to be able to tell that breaks that cycle? And that story is using risk management best practices. And a safe environment is a long, long, long way away from risk management best practices. But the video 3 talks about how you tell a story that breaks the cycle of rising sexual abuse and even faster rising sexual abuse costs. If you're involved in buying insurance for your club, you'll understand most acutely how these costs are rising. I'm using insurance as an example here, but many youth serving organisations can no longer get insurance. The kind of coverage that used to be readily available for any organisation is now hard to find. It costs a great deal more than it used to cost, and it covers a great deal less than it used to cover. And what you need to remember is that the safe environment programs that you're using were never designed to protect the people and organisations that fail to prevent sexual abuse. So the only protection that you will have in the future against the consequences of failing to prevent sexual abuse is what you do to make sure that you protect children as well as possible, and the way you put together a story that can convince people that you have conscientiously protected children. And a safe environment doesn't achieve that. That's what Breaking the Cycle is all about. It's helping you to be able to tell the story of how conscientiously you protect the minors and vulnerable adults in your care. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos from us, please subscribe. And we look forward to seeing you in the first video of how the cycle came into being. Thank you very much.